Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Karen Wills. I'm the Senior Vice President of Marketing and Investor Relations here at Strategicon, and I would like to welcome you all to our webinar today. We're thrilled to have such a diverse audience from all around the world. So thank you for taking the time to be here, and hopefully I think you'll learn a lot from our panelists that we have here. However, before we dive in, as you know the drill, I'd like to share a few housekeeping notes. Please do check out the additional resources, the handout section of your control panel. Feel free to download them anytime during the session. I think you'll find them very enlightening. And we also would like to encourage you to be an active participant. If you have any questions during the discussion, please type them into the questions section of the control panel. I will be monitoring it during the webinar, and I will get the questions to our panelists. So that said, it's my pleasure to introduce our esteemed panelists today. First, we have Christian Hein. Christian is an executive advisor specializing in health tech and AI. With over 25 years of experience in the life science sector, he's held senior leadership positions at large organizations such as Novartis, Amgen, and Actelion. Most recently, as Vice President of Digital Transformation and Innovation Execution at Novartis, he's led the development of AI partnerships with startups and tech giants like Microsoft and Tencent, successfully scaling large AI solutions globally. So Christian brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to our conversation, which we're very excited about. Joining him is Anca Capescu, CEO of Strategicon and the driving force behind the company's revolutionary Clinical Maestro platform, making her an invaluable resource for today's discussion. With over 15 years experience in the clinical research industry, Anca's expertise in clinical outsourcing and analytics is extensive. As head of clinical outsourcing and analytics at BioMarin Pharmaceuticals, she managed and advanced the company's global outsourcing, vendor management, and clinical analytics functions. So together, they will be sharing insights on the challenges pharma faces with AI and digital tools, and offering perspectives that are both thought-provoking and actionable. So we are so excited to be having this session with you, and so let's get started. So Anca, let me hand it over to you to kick things off.
Oh, thank you very much. Hi, Christian. Today is going to be a relaxed conversation, as if Christian and I were having a coffee in some nice coffee shop somewhere. So, but lots of content, hopefully. We'd like to center the discussion actually around Christian's white paper, which I truly enjoyed reading and really advise you to read it. It's called 15 Key Insights on Health Tech and Big Pharma Collaborations. Christian, we're not going to do all 15, right? So we're gonna pick some important discussion points. So let me get started. You know, your first point was there is no burning platform yet for pharma. The fundamental pharma business model hasn't been disrupted in 20 years. Why?
Yeah. Well, if I knew, honestly, I'm amazed by the stability of this industry. So everybody from a very snowy Paris, it's really like snowing like crazy outside. So yes, I'm really puzzled by this, to be honest. I really went full-time into digital transformation of pharma and biotech more than 10 years ago when I was part of the first team that created Amgen Digital Health back in the day. And I was really thinking by now, pharma would have been totally disrupted by either some external tech player or internally. Turns out I was wrong, and I wouldn't be surprised if this stays on for quite a bit longer. The business model is just too stable and too good. It is basically still the very same that we had 20 years ago. I'm still seeing right now, obviously, a lot of steps where we bring in elements to improve the value chain, but the fundamental disruption I haven't seen yet. And to be honest, the older I get, the less I'm wondering when we're going to see that. That's that there's still tremendous opportunity in bringing AI into the value chain. What's your opinion on that? And maybe with your digital tool that you developed, Clinical Maestro, what was the experience there? Do you believe pharma really wants to change and wants to do things differently?
Look, as an entrepreneur, I want that. I'm most hopeful, but just like you, I'm deeply frustrated by how slow the adoption process is. When I started Clinical Maestro, I didn't just come up with a good idea. I lived the pain points that the solution is trying to solve myself. and in more than one organization. So for me, it was an absolute no-brainer that the industry needs specialized tools, that it needs to evolve out of Excel, that a sourcing of hundreds of millions of dollars of contracts should not be done by email, and that pharma needs data to run analytics. So those fundamental elements of the need to understand your own data, the need to be able to benchmark, the need to source with tools that are fit for purpose were such a no-brainer for me that I thought that once a tool is out, people are just gonna, immediately use it and embrace a change. But what I found is that the journey from nice to have to must have, just like you, it's a very long one. Because the system is not fundamentally working. I wouldn't say it works that well. It doesn't. But because the margins are so high in pharma, the story of the return of investment, it's not easy to write sometimes. So there is a tendency to continue on the status quo, although there is a lot to lose by not changing. There is a perception that there is also a lot to lose by changing, because we are creatures of habit. So it's not an easy journey, but it is changing. I mean, we have been growing so nicely. The customer profile is increasing. I thought by now we would have 3 times more customers that we do have, but the numbers are going up, and that's good. But it's not as quickly as I thought it would be. And on that point, Christian, in your paper, you were talking about pharma. One of the causes may be because pharma is just risk averse. They make huge bets on R&D, on innovation, on molecules that are expensive to develop and easy to fail. But elsewhere, they're super risk averse. How does it compound? They seem fundamentally different concepts within the same organization.
That's what I keep advising all my startups. Don't think pharma is innovative. Pharma is amazingly innovative on molecule innovation, because that's the lifeblood, right? We all know after 20 years patents are off. So new molecule innovation has always been a lifeblood. But because they're so dependent on that, everything else has to be SOP all over the place. And as we all know, SOP is the natural enemy of innovation. And plus, there is absolutely no incentive for anybody in pharma leadership to really be innovative in the ways of working, because as we just discussed early on, the fundamental model may not be perfect, but it's still working. So to me, that is really one of the things that I keep telling my startups. Don't assume that you're going to be received with open arms. There is a lot of convincing you'll need to do. And the usual saying you're going to hear is, yeah, we've always done it this way. Why do it differently? And unfortunately, that is still very much the fundamentals here. I assume you've seen the same with your solution, right?
Yeah, it's not the process of convincing, but you rarely, as a young organization, as a startup, you rarely reach a decision maker right off the bat. So you have to go through layers and layers of different groups and individuals that have to make the case up for innovation. And I don't know how or what was the criteria in your case on the successful innovation implementation stories. But what we found is that the work required to prove the return on investment, to fight for the innovation, it takes a lot of energy, and a lot of time people that have been sourcing all their lives, or they have been in their functions all their life, they don't actually have the training to create those stories. So I'm actually really curious in the successful stories that you witnessed or you were part of. What changed the balance? Was it a lot of bottom up? Hey, we need it, so it's coming from multiple stakeholders, or is it more a visionary leader that says, hey, forget the red tape? we're going to do this because that's the way it needs to happen?
I would say it's a mix of all of the above. I mean, yes, pharma, because of the risk averseness, the good news, if you're taking decision by committee, if you're wrong, everybody was wrong, and you just forget about it and move on to the next thing. And I know we have a lot of pharma people on the call. I hope you forgive my transparency here, but that is unfortunately the reality I've seen in every large pharma company I've worked with. Now, so one end is indeed you need to convince as many stakeholders as possible. And actually one of the roles when I'm advising the startups that I'm working with is indeed, okay, this person you're speaking to actually has absolutely no decision power whatsoever. They may have a nice title, but it's the first and 3 layers down the corner that you actually need to speak to, because this person has the budget. And I think we need to speak about budgets and budget holders and the complexity of managing these things as well in a bit. And then the ROI, yeah, that's tough. I've been working both on internal solutions that really were just improving operational efficiency. On this one, it's on paper a bit easier to show ROI, but even then you need to be very disciplined in measuring it, and nobody ever has the time of taking in, okay, how was the process before? How was the process afterwards? How is it actually going better now? That takes a lot of effort. People are too lazy for that. So even if an ROI for an internal solution is relatively easy to measure, people just don't do it. And then I was implementing really large scale solutions. One was, for example, a large AI solution that was given directly to the sales force. And we even went through the effort of doing a proper A/B blind, really like a proper clinical trial of an A/B trial with cohort, and a cohort that gets solution and cohort that doesn't get solution. You can't do it any better, right? That is our clinical standard, how we also do clinical trials. And even then, we had like a lot of people questioning, yes, but is it truly, or didn't you just pick the wrong ones or whatever? I mean, there's always easy ways of pulling apart an ROI if you basically have the naysayers, and obviously at some point you will always find some naysayers around these solutions. So it is indeed, if you have a visionary leader that really believes in things, it can change a lot. But the visionary leader on its own doesn't do everything. You have to convince a lot of other people in the journey. And if you can get through those and make sure you have a what is in it for them, particularly, be it procurement, be it clinical ops, be it whoever is your decision makers, and there's always at least 5 to 10, you have to have why it matters to you for each one of them to really be successful. And that's what I'm really teaching my startups all the time. I'm pretty sure you've encountered the same. Maybe you can share some stories around, how complex the decision making was for your solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also the risk evaluation framework, which tends to be really skewed. I mean, let's be honest, when you are starting, when you have a new solution, it's not going to have every bell and whistle that larger, more established solutions may have, but it's also going to have a lot of innovation, a lot of different ways of doing things. It's going to have a significantly more aggressive roadmap. It's going to have a lot of commitment. So the tolerance for risk in startups is very low. And there is this desire to achieve the end state too quickly. But without making investments early on, the end state can never be achieved, right? Because the investors don't have the patience and the tolerance to sustain very long cycles. And sometimes very little understanding of what is happening on the other side, like you are explaining, Christian. So that educational component around de-risking startups, investing in innovation, having a different type of tolerance and different type of expectations, we all know it pays out significantly, because once you remove the patch of an old system that people hated anyway, and you get to the aha moment and you work collaboratively to continuously improve, that fuels the next generation of innovation, because you reinvest that that revenue back into the development pipeline. But with AI, it's a little bit different. You spoke in your article that the health tech, people like me, they and pharma, they don't speak the same language. How can they find a Google translator there so they can converse easier?
Well, I guess every company that wants to be successful, this has to have people that do the translation, and the good ones do have that. I mean, obviously now there's not a single pharma company that has at least hired some of these. There's also been obviously in the recent economic turmoil a lot of downsizing on these, but you need people who speak both languages, because let's face it, the normal pharma employee has never had to do anything with AI, and so there is a massive learning curve. I know a lot of companies also spend a lot on capability building, but ultimately you really need to have people who speak both languages, and I was fortunate enough to have those on my team. And if you have those that they can really bridge those two worlds, you get into something really powerful. But it's not an easy one. And these people, by the way, not only need to translate to the business owners of these solutions, but they also, going back to the risk averseness, I think it's really important for them to also speak then with compliance, with regulatory, with legal, with IT security, with there's 5 other functions I'm forgetting right now that all want to have their say in something, and they're all just incentivized to do zero risk because that's their job, right? So if you have somebody who is able to really speak to them and say, you know what is really the risk we're taking here? It doesn't have to be absolutely zero, or can we live with some theoretical remainder of a risk and get there over time? There is a lot of just hand holding that needs to be done internally with people and make them understand what the added value of this is versus the risk. And so you have to have those people in your company, otherwise you really won't be successful for the future.
Well, I recognize it so well because I remember a couple of years ago when I was just before COVID, when I was first coming to the market with Clinical Maestro and talking about innovation in procurement. There was a lot of discussion going on in parallel around bitcoins, using bitcoins for procurement. And I sat in several of these presentations, and I was thinking, what are they talking about? Because fundamentally behind the scene, 99% is Excel and 1% is a generic solution that doesn't work. And they're talking about things that were so far away from the current state that they become unachievable. Now, I just less than a month ago, I came back from Copenhagen when I presented about AI use cases in procurement, and it was a really well attended presentation. It's actually on our website, and lots of people came to me to to ask about the future. But at the same time, there is a confusion between what AI applications really are, business applications, versus the tendency to think that your kid goes on ChatGPT and they do their homework there faster. So I think there is an educational component that it's missing, and I wonder, like, is pharma really making the purchasing of AI solutions a little bit easier right now, or do you think it's as complicated or more complicated than before?
Overall, there are steps of making it easier. Obviously, everybody does the usual co-pilots, that's normal. But everybody else is at least, because if you're a CEO right now, you cannot say, I don't have an AI strategy. That's Wall Street is gonna really not gonna like you for it. So everybody's at least piloting a lot. I don't see yet a lot of solutions at scale, but at least I see active willingness of bringing something in. Maybe, I know we've prepared some questions. Maybe now is a good time for a poll, actually, for our audience here, and see actually, okay, what are you considering right now? Maybe Karen, do you want to pull up that poll for the audience?
Absolutely. So we just pulled up the poll. Actually, now we just pulled it up. Okay, so the audience can actually see the poll. So it's in which business areas are you considering an AI technology solution? So clinical operations, including patient recruitment, feasibility, study management, clinical development, protocol design, planning, early study, budgeting or modeling. In your legal or business infrastructure, what about in procurement, sourcing, or vendor management? Or you're not considering? So I don't think, Anka, I don't think you and Christian can actually see it, but I see a number of people starting their voting here. We'll give it a little bit more time because they're still coming in at a pretty good pace.
I'm really curious to see what comes out of this. I hope.
Yeah.
I would really be surprised. I mean, we've been doing, and I hope our audience will forgive us for that. We've been doing a bit of pharma bashing. you know, I've been there until last year, so but I've been in people's shoes, and I know that my guess is about 1/3 of pharma people really get it. 2/3 are slowly getting there, and I would assume we have a higher percentage of those who get it on this webinar. Otherwise,
All right. Well, it looks like it's leveled out now, so I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. Anybody going once, going twice? Done voting? Okay, we're going to close it, and now I will share with you guys the results, and we'll see how Christian's prediction comes up. Okay.
12%. I'm relaxed now.
All right.
But it's still this. We should take this poll again, Christian. We should do this a year from now on with some fresher experience. It's still very low. Of course, we don't have thousands of people in the audience. But what I like is that procurement, sourcing, vendor management are maybe more in the radar, and this is also because of the low risk. I think anything that involves just business process and it doesn't go through the regulatory scrutiny, it tends to be more of the starting playground. But I don't know, what are your thoughts, Christian?
I'm happy, pleased also to see clinical development, because I'm working with several companies in that space, and this is actually where I believe one of the biggest AI revolutions is happening right now. There are companies out there, including ones I'm advising, that are able to really completely predict the outcome of a clinical trial without you having to do it. So I actually believe, in spite of what I said early on, that we are now finally on the verge of something where maybe pharma finally becomes a little bit more AI first and digital driven than they were in the past. And I completely with you. I mean, procurement, anything like that is a total no-brainer. We don't see a lot of legal business infrastructure here, but I would assume that's maybe because of our audience, because otherwise that's also very no-brainer that you really just go into what used to be called robotic process automation with AI agents right now. I really hope that we're going to be seeing quite a lot of the underlying steps being much more friendly. But I assume that's not the target audience here of this webinar. But I'm very pleased that we are having only 12% not considering. I'm really kind of curious if those people could comment later on in the Q&A why they're not considering. Are you just believing it's all just a hot air balloon that's going to implode, or because you don't have money? And I would love to learn more about how why somebody wouldn't be considering at least something. We are not saying buying, but at least considering.
Yeah, and what I'm thinking, Christian, also is the types of things that are crossing these buckets. So, you are talking about a solution or solutions that you are working with that could potentially predict the outcome of a clinical trial based on several criteria and, tens of years of history. But what if you can combine that with the ability to also predict its cost? I was at the conference 2 weeks ago in Barcelona, and there was a CRO executive talking about the numbers in terms of clinical trial success with less than 15% of total studies being completed on time and on budget. So we know how expensive it is to not be on time, and that inevitably leads to not being on budget. But not being on budget also has to do with how complicated the protocols may be, and the number of amendments that you may need to go through, or the wrong strategy from the get-go. And all of these can be effectively modeled. We are modeling in absence of knowing potential clinical outcomes by asking the users to put parameters in our solution in order to predict cost. But what if this would not be driven by the user? What if feasibility data or study modeling data would automatically feed into this? So I think the crossover between what is being done at micro scale most of the time, extremely innovative ideas are still kind of bucketed there, right, on a certain vertical. And being able to break through across verticals, like legal contracts. Why would you spend hundreds of hours on MSA red lines? How expensive is that? I remember being on the pharma side when my legal team insisted on always putting a clause, which 95% of the time they would remove. And we were, why do you put this liability clause there? You know you're going to negotiate it out, because that's how the brain functions. You know, an AI would have taken it out to start with because it has very low likelihood of, you know, of being agreed upon. So all of these things could be transformative in my mind.
Legal tech is one of the highest areas of investment right now for AI. Totally agree. And I'm looking forward to that. As much as I love the lawyers I've worked with, and I've signed how many 100 pages contract in my life, but let's face it, as you say, 80% of those are clauses that are never going to be needed, and that could be very much standardized. So on that, I'm very much looking forward to my AI companion. And in the future, I would even see a world where, you know, my AI agent is negotiating with yours on the really annoying items, like, okay, so, that really nobody cares about except for lawyers. And then we can really just figure out 2 or 3 business terms, and the rest is basically being automated. Lawyers are not going to like it, but I would love to see that. By the way, on the predicting of the success rates of trials, there I must give credit to my former employer. Novartis really had a system like that, called Sense Nerve Live, for years already, even in pre-Gen AI days. All based on AI that looked like a huge air traffic control center where you could see every single trail, dig down to every single one. You had all those blinking red traffic lights, like here's something going on. I mean, you can build some really amazing stuff, but that was basically home built within Novartis. I'm still surprised that we don't see more of these solutions being rolled out more globally and being more standardized as well.
Do you see Novartis taking that that solution, the traffic, the air traffic controller, and actually putting it out beyond Novartis in a more, or partnering with a startup that could take it and you know, would have a different type of incentive to maybe initially just upgrade it for Novartis, but I see it as potentially maybe being part of a Transcelerate type of collaboration.
There is some transferable elements. I find it very hard, and I've only seen few successful examples of pharma really outsourcing something into the world. Obviously, we're now seeing this with AstraZeneca and Evinova, which I find a really interesting approach to kind of say, okay, you know, on the clinical trial front end, here's something that we built internally that we want to bring to the world. We've discussed that, not for that particular case, but for some other cases, and usually at Novartis we decided against it because it takes a lot of effort. And you know what, it's one thing being able to scale something with your own company, but working then with, I don't know, 20 different legacy systems at every other client and trying to figure out through all those. There's a reason why consulting companies make so much money of this, because it is a very complex system. So I wouldn't necessarily say that I would say pharma is the best owner of such a cross-brand solution. That's actually why I believe in health tech companies. That's why I'm working with them right now, because I believe a health tech company can do miracles, and we've seen it on the commercial side. Viva has totally taken 19 out of 20 big pharma companies with their solution. They are getting now more and more engaged also in the clinical development field. It's going to be really interesting to see how that pans out. We've seen Benchling doing it on the research side in the lab, giving like a common platform. I truly believe that health tech companies are way better at developing these things than pharma, and I don't think it's going to change anytime in the future. But let's see if Evinova is the exception. But Evinova obviously has been given quite a lot of latitude, so I'm following that venture quite closely. I'm really curious to see how that will pan out.
Yeah, and they are actually vocal about this too. So it's good that they are presenting the use cases, sometimes not necessarily to the right audience, but along these lines that smaller companies or not necessarily startups, but tech companies are significantly more motivated to succeed, especially because it's so hard to forge a partnership with pharma. We've put out a proposal, our very first, to take a large pharma entire historical data set, which is primarily in Excel and in some old systems, and extract it, massage it, standardize it, harmonize it, and produce in the initial phase just a super a powerful internal benchmarking and prediction tool with their own data. And that of course, this can be further enhanced to the next level. We are having these discussions. Obviously, it's not easy, but pharma companies sit on this data gold. It's there, and they are not going to put the resources other than maybe bring some consultants in to analyze it, to take it to the next level. But should they give the data to us, imagine what we would do with it. So the motivation to succeed, to change, to transform, to demonstrate value, it's so high. Is a question of convincing the multiple stakeholders that, by the way, today don't value the data set. It's sitting there in SharePoint or wherever. And then it becomes very risky when you take it out of there, which we all know it isn't. But that brings the discussion of, you wrote about the journey of navigating multiple stakeholders. Tell us a bit more about that. I know it's complicated because the decisions are done by not by unanimous. It has to be unanimous. Nobody wants to be left behind.
Yeah, and that's
what's your advice?
If you're realistic, if you're within big pharma, you know that your core skill is navigating the matrix. If you're not doing that, you're not successful. You're not going anywhere. There's only so many things you can do on your own, and if you do too many things on your own, somebody's gonna get annoyed, and you're gonna get pushback. Plus, at the annual budgeting discussion, obviously, there's always the usual fight for dollars. Now, for startup and entrepreneurs, that is something that is really hard to understand, because they're just used to, okay, let's do it, let's get it done, and we're all one team. And that is actually a lot of what I'm really training my startups on, is trying to help them understand company politics and who decides what, and what are the most likely arguments they're going to hear against their solution, and have something ready for that. I think there's no way around it. I don't think this will ever go in pharma. It is just too much embedded into the company culture. It would take a totally, probably a new pharma company built totally from scratch. On any kind of big pharma companies, even the ones like Amgen that was a part of that, was a small nimble biotech. After a certain size, I guess I would say the $5 to $10 billion revenue size, you're going to be a big institution, and big institution have politics. That's never going to change. But it is important that if you're a startup, you know how to navigate these things. And if you're a pharma, at least you need to realize that, and then maybe make it easier a little bit for the companies you partner with to navigate these things. So if you're an internal champion for any of these solutions, a lot of your job is going to be indeed just that, of being a champion and trying always to be on the side of the partner that you're working with. That's not an easy task. I've done it. A lot of my team has done it. It can be quite frustrating, but I think it pays off in the end.
Yeah, but the cycle is so long. Actually, we have a poll right after this, and it's frustrating because sometimes it takes a year to navigate the journey, and some of the stakeholders that are going to have to say yes are not the primary buyers, and they are never going to go deep enough to understand what you do. So you spoke also in your paper that IT can be a blocker. They can't possibly understand every angle of a very specific solution, but bringing them on board just delays the process, and there is no way around it, so you have to do it. So you are building stone by stone, but look, in the last 2 years there were massive layoffs, and departments have shrunk, and sometimes the champion, once you navigate it, you are like right there, and your champion leaves the company. I mean, actually quite amazing leaders in pharma outsourcing, it completely puzzles me, left either on their own because they couldn't bear the pressure, or they were given no budget, or their projects were cut, and a lot of them are consulting. But how is that going to support, when what do you tell your startups to tell their investors who don't see that? They don't see that. They say, hey, you haven't hit your numbers, or it takes you 12 months to reach a solution. Maybe solution is not good. So how do you do that dance?
Before I answer that, let me just put in a word for the average pharma CIO. That is not a very enjoyable role right now. CIOs are basically, if you look at their roles, honestly, most pharma companies don't even know where to put them. You know, chief digital officers for a while were put directly on the board, etc. So they got all the prominent roles. CIOs are seen as, okay, they're the housekeepers. They're making sure that the laptops are there. They're making sure SAP doesn't fail. And they are supposed to do that with the cheapest possible budget because it's seen as a pure cost center, not as a value-adding center. And please ideally outsource everything into India. So that is, and all the cool stuff, you know, either the AI guys or the digital guys get to do, and really you're just here as a housekeeper. So it is really not a very enjoyable role. So, I mean, if you're in such a role, what do? You try to standardize, because that is basically the only thing that will make sure that things are 24/7 always on, and that will always make sure that they're kind of cost efficient. I mean, if you're a CEO, bringing in yet another digital solution somewhere on the left and the right is a nightmare for you. I totally get that. So first of all, put yourself in the shoes of these guys. Why are they doing it? So, and then obviously they also sometimes trying to build stuff themselves. Pharma, as I mentioned, isn't usually not very good at building these things themselves. At least they're trying. So a little bit of compassion for the pharma IT teams. They're never in a very enjoyable role, and the reason why they're making it a bit painful for you, there is good reasons for them. So you also have to have the right arguments why your solution actually really adds value. Now on these long cycles, that is actually one of the reasons. You know, this white paper that I wrote was actually triggered by a good VC friend of mine who says, look, okay, right now, every health tech company, they all tried getting reimbursement for the solutions, didn't work. So now everybody seems to be turning back to pharma as the deep pockets, and you're just going to make a miracle money out of there. So why don't you write a paper with your experience, having seen it from the receiving end and from the selling end, on what's broken in that process? And that is really why I wrote that white paper in the first place. It is on one end a little bit of a tool list for startups to at least be aware of, that all these things you need to navigate. But it was also written with the purpose of investor. I've shared it with a lot of VC friends of mine to just make them aware that, you know, pharma has on paper deep pockets, but it's not the easiest client to work with. Maybe should we pull up the poll right now? How long it takes? I can give you mine about how long it takes.
Yeah, let's see if the I think this audience is going to get the numbers right. Karen, can you help it?
Absolutely. Here we go. Yes. Unfortunately, Christian, you can't vote, but we'll see what everybody else does. So the question is, how long do you think it takes from first contact to contract signing for technology? It is fun, Anka and Kristen, not to tease you a little bit, but I can actually see the numbers as they're coming in. I think you're going to be. I don't think you're going to be surprised too much, but so the options are less than 6 months, 6 to 12 months, or greater than 12 months. So you guys want to take a prediction, and I'll leave this open for a couple more minutes, or not a couple more seconds here.
I don't want to influence the audience, but I know the answer for myself. So, and I think Christian has been fighting on his side to reduce that cycle.
I'll share my number in a minute. I also share what we did at Novartis about this. So.
Yes.
All right, so it looks like it's slowed down. So anybody else going once, going twice, if you'd like to vote? Okay, I'm going to close the poll, and then here, you guys, I will now share the, give me 1 second. I'm going to share the results so you guys can see it.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah, and the 6 to 12 months is more in the biotech side.
Yeah.
It used to be actually much faster. Now, you know, we are in discussion with several top pharma companies, and it's going really, really well. But we had our, you know, BD call earlier today, and like, can we take this to the finish line this year? And they're like, no, we are in November. Pharma goes in vacation in December. It's just not going to happen. January is going to be busy. It's going to hit March. And sometimes it feels like it's just a couple of months away, but it isn't. It's a slow grinding machine. What do you say, Christian, about this?
So on what I wanted to share is at Novartis, we actually had what we called a white glove service for what was really considered a priority partnership. So basically, let's say CEO said, I really want this thing to get done. Because our average time was 12 months plus as well. So what we were able to do, and really, this is probably another AI use case right now to be built, because you really need Gen AI for that. But we really had people who really understood the process, and by the process I mean the processes, which means, okay, you actually want to work with somebody. So you first get basically procurement to say send a 500-page document that you need to sign. Then it goes to blah blah blah. Then IT security is going to send you something totally irrelated. 5 other departments are going to be sending you a questionnaire. A lot of these things are being outsourced by people in India that will need to actually wait for something to be filled before something else can be filled in. You have absolutely no idea what this answer. You have absolutely nobody to talk to. So a lot of what we had was several people in my team whose job it was to help partners navigate that process. So from that, in our best cases, and we've shown that in several times, that we could bring it down from 12 months to 4 months. That was our best record ever. I don't think anything below that is possible technically within big pharma. It just really takes somebody who sees this process end to end and really helps the partner, figure out what to do where. Yeah, unfortunately, but I think the reality is you will only get that white glove service if you have people who really understand these things, and B, if it's really high priority.
So how do you get on that fast track? And Karen, let's take the quick poll out so I can see Christian. How do you, we are navigating the process right now, and many other companies like us with, great ideas, great traction, already proven, use cases, so on and so forth. So how do you get on that fast track? Like, knock on the digital innovation office, not everybody has it. Like, what do you do?
So for the fast track, let's be honest, you know what, Pharma is a very hierarchy-driven organization. Something got fast-tracked if it got traction high enough. So if you're SVP or EVP level, or ideally executive committee, if the executive committee wanted to see something, then we put this process in place. So basically, if you really want to get something done fast, get it onto the visibility of the executive committee. Now, how do you get there? that depends a lot on your network, on your persistence, and on your relevance to whatever. And now, digital innovation teams, I would like to give them credit, because obviously I led one of them. They're also not in an easy position. They are the ones totally understanding the startup side. They are the ones who really want to bring something in, and they're basically seeing an entire legacy machine that they just need to influence. It's like, the famous equivalent of Don Quixote find in the windmills. It's so these innovation teams are your allies. The problem is, in most of the cases, the innovation teams are not the ones having the budget. And we have discussed a little bit about the budget, but I think to go deeper into that question, it's something that really we need to understand. Okay, who's actually paying for that? And if you're a startup, you really want to understand which budget you're actually being paid out of. And that is something that most health tech companies have no idea how pharma budgeting works, and how hard it is to get on that. And if you're, for example, right now in November, and you're trying to knock on a door, there is a good chance you may only get the project in a year from now, because the budget for next year is already fully allocated. So maybe we should talk a little bit about budgeting as well. What was your experience in that field? How do you manage the CFO and their role in the journey?
So very similar, and that I want to touch a point related to the outsourcing model, which I know you wanted to discuss as well. So initially, when you are introducing a solution that technically doesn't replace another solution or another service, guaranteed you are not on the budget. Because Excel, it's technically, people are technically on the budget. So the budget use case is even harder to create. And yes, you miss a deadline. And this year, our Q4 is always so tight, because we are like actively waiting on some key projects right now to get the green light. And as you know, at the last minute, there is always a trade-off, and the decision, the prioritization decision is not always made by your champion. You know, it's like 10% of the budget needs to go out. You know, it's going here, here, here. So the lack of budget availability truly puts you back a year. If you are not in this year's budget, we actually heard from a project today that we couldn't make it in the budget purely because of politics. So it's like you can't do anything. You just have to wait for the next cycle and keep building the case. But hey, that's a year of wait. So extremely frustrated. On the other hand, pharma is spending insane amount of money on, let's say, CROs. They are on every study. The clinical teams have a lot of money. We have benchmarking tools that consistently show that they could be paying 10-15% less consistently, or that the scoping is not good. So in these cases, that seems to be that could be a lot of budget made available purely through savings. But the full outsource model that creates such a dependency on the CRO, and then it actually blew my mind looking at some of the pharma budgets in which there is a category called pass-through costs. But you know, pass-through costs, we're not talking about shipping and travel. We are talking about 10 other services like ePro, eCOA, I don't know, site payments, you name it, for which there is technically no scrutiny. And we're not talking about small amounts, we're talking about large amounts. So I think the outsourcing model is flawed, and there isn't enough thinking of reinvesting, creating savings to reinvest in innovation. Because technically, if you are looking at, let's say, 100 million in R&D budget, for which you can save, we say 20%, let's say 10%, we're talking about 10 million. 10 million, let's say 20% of that, 2 million, could be invested in building better benchmarking, or optimizing the process, or better oversight of the CRO, or streamlining processes, because you are going to put that much in the pocket. But there is little awareness of what can be saved, and a lot of skepticism. Although we have the proof cases, they're like, you know, we are partnering for a long time, there is a level of trust. You know, there is a skepticism on the return of investment, but it doesn't actually take that long to prove it. So I'm curious, you know, how do you take the concept of saving? You can save X, allocate a portion of X into the innovation, so then you can get triple X. Does it even exist? Though in biotech it does exist, and it pairs quite well with some of the risks they are taking on molecules. But I haven't seen it in big pharma. Oh, we are trying it right now, actually.
The reason is because pharma accounting is actually not that easy. There's a really simple reason for that. The person that's going to give you your budget for your innovative solution is probably not going to be the same person that has the entire clinical operations budget, right? So that means, okay, on one end you're spending something additional, but the savings are going to be resulting, you know, in somebody else's pot. So you're not even going to get credit for that. So, you know, that is a little bit the fragmentation of pharma budgets. And if you want to avoid that, you really have to go all the way up to the CFO of the entire R&D department. And these guys are quite busy and not that easy to get to. Otherwise, you're just going to really see a lot of these solutions are just seen as cost centers. And the ROI is hard to prove because it is not connected. Plus pharma, honestly, pharma's internal controlling mechanisms are messy. That's why, you know, a lot of the consulting firms get away with charging so much, because they're selling the same thing into 5 different departments, but nobody ever aggregates that number. So there is something also fundamentally broken in the way pharma accounts for both costs and spending. And I don't think we're going to fix that anytime soon, unless SAP all of a sudden becomes like a much smarter tool than it is right now. And even with HANA, I don't see that happening anytime soon. So unfortunately, that is one of the key things, that the spending of the innovative solution and the benefits of the innovative solution usually don't come out of the same pot.
So Anka,
you're making a
sorry,
point. Yeah.
I just want to mention we're coming to the top of the hour, and we do have a question
Yeah.
that came in that I'd like to address, give you both of you enough time to answer it. So the question that comes in is, what is the top AI use case that just can't be ignored, right? It's too good, especially, as we've discussed this hour, the conservative nature of the industry, certainly in some areas. But what's the top use case that they just can't ignore? Christian, you want to go?
Yeah, sure.
You go first. Yeah.
I just have to mention one of the companies that I'm working with here. It's a company called Quant Health out of Israel. They're really able, as I said early on, you give them a molecule, you give them a clinical trial design, they will give you back a Kaplan-Meier curve. They've shown it in more than 100 studies now with more than 85% accuracy. This to me is a total game changer in how you design your clinical trials. So that is just something. I mean, when I tell this to my pharma peers, they always say you're crazy, until we tell them, look, you just try it out and test it for yourself. So that to me is right now probably the most amazing use case I've seen. But I know obviously you also have a pretty good one. Maybe we also want to go into that one.
Yeah. Yeah, several for us is generically speaking, not narrowing down use case. The fact that pharma is notoriously unstandardized when it comes to process. Anything from contracting to a budget evaluation. I mean, you've probably seen a CRO budget. It may have easily 500 lines and nobody can decipher, or it may roll up into the Novartis bid grid that has only 100, but behind the scene, the CRO bid grid might have 1,000. So that lack of standardization has always completely corrupted even the concept of transparency. Therefore, people spend hours and hours trying to seek that transparency by orchestrating complex agreements that nobody can understand. To me, one of the biggest use cases in general in AI is that you can get to a level of standardization while still maintaining some individuality. So for example, the ability to map activities one-to-one, the ability to drive analytics that are informative, and that can lead to decisions that ultimately bring efficiency, cost savings, and actually can point out flaws into the execution plan. These to me are no-brainers. Like, how can we continue keeping everything in SharePoint when, with a large company, we were looking at their bid grid. It's just, my head is spinning. It's like, how is that even possible to perform any kind of analytics when you are trying to get so much detail that the human brain is impossible to actually, it cannot process it. So to me, bringing that level of efficiency in sourcing and budget management combined with the better feasibility data and optimization scenarios are absolute no-brainers, because the risk is relatively low, very low. We are talking about data that may not be valued, but that has a combination of operational, regulatory, and cost aspects that can be highly impactful. On getting that only 15% of the studies being on time and on budget, maybe switching it to at least 50 being on time and on budget. That to me, it's such a high value proposition with such low cost, that does, and it's unregulated. So to me, it's a no-brainer to go in that direction. But still, as no-brainer as it seems, it's not so easy to explain. I want to kind of go on a final note here on the last 5 minutes, and perhaps we're going to have more questions. But Christian, is there hope? I don't know. If you do this, then we are going to go nuts. What does it take? What will it take to change?
I'm the eternal optimist. It is just going to take longer. It is just going to take longer, but it's going to come. Even pharma cannot totally resist everything. And I know that there is not a single R&D department in big pharma that is not being under pressure for becoming more operationally efficient. So I think the acknowledgement that something needs to change is there. I think the how a lot of farmers are still figuring out, but the acknowledgement that something fundamental needs to change is really starting to emerge. We're now $2 billion per NME. It's not going to go any down anytime soon. So every farmer realizes we need to change. So yes, there's hope. It's just going to be slower than we all expect.
Okay, well, I must be encouraged by this. I mean, we are seeing the change, and as you say, it's slower than I expected, and it's not in the DNA of the entrepreneur to anticipate slowness, because you are such a believer in what you do. It's crystal clear to you on what it takes, and it's the most frustrating thing to be in this waiting game, dealing with politics, departments, budgets, and you explained it so well. I must believe it's changing. So I'm an optimist just like you, and things are changing. We are seeing the change. I think the expectations of big pharma of what technology will bring also need to be somewhat moderated, because you can't wait for, you know, the cake to be fully baked to try. You need to try a little bit sooner and have that spirit of partnership and collaboration, because ultimately you could be driving the requirements of the change. So I'm an optimist too. It's going to be good.
And let's face it, we are. I'm really a believer that we had a lot of those fake hypes like Bitcoin, crypto, or all the others. I was part of that.
Yeah.
That was honestly a solution trying to find a problem to solve. AI is different, and we are really only we're now having the chat interfaces. We are seeing the first steps of agentic AI emerging right now. Seriously, you know, if you're not on it right now, if you're part of the 12%, I think you're missing out, and you will be missing out big time.
Absolutely. Well, Karen, are there any more questions from the audience?
I think we're all set. So we'd just like to thank our
Okay. Yeah, we can hear you, but I heard saying we are all set. Look, Christian, I would like to do more of this with you in a year. Maybe we do more polls, we check more temperature. I love working with you, and I want to work with you more. But I hope for the audience, this is, for those of you who know, should still be an eye-opener, or an incentive to go back to your department and fight for innovation, and fight for an idea, and teach the innovation seekers or promoters on how to navigate this web of relationships and budgets and unknowns. And all the education you are doing, Christian, it's making a huge difference to the entire community, to the startup, to the investors, and hopefully to pharma companies. So I hope for the audience that you are going to read Christian's white paper. Also two of mine. One is called Generic Sourcing Solutions Are Unfit for Outsourcing. And I think it's a quick read, and you will know why they are unfit, and why it drives me crazy that they are not being replaced faster. And the other one, it's called The State of Technology Innovation, which is pretty much along the same lines. That's why Christian and I were alike minds, actually, since we met. So thank you so much for this. For participating in our event. I hope it was helpful. And Christian, I truly enjoyed the discussion. So thank you for doing what you're doing. It's making a difference.
Thank you, same here, Anka, and I'm wishing you all the best on the next steps, because I totally believe what you're doing is a no-brainer, and it should be everywhere.
Okay, thank you so very much. Thank you, audience. Karen, I think you can close it. Thank you.
Bye.